guys? I'm Alex.
I'm Jason with the Table Monkeys, and today we are going to be discussing the flop press.
Yeah, we made some videos last week about the King's move, which is probably the most hated outside move. So now we're going to cover the most hated inside move, the flop press.
Yeah, and when we're talking about these moves, we're talking about Devin's hill of arm wrestling technique, right? So at the very top, you have the high hook, which is like the ideal, perfect, fundamental move where you've got all your rise intact, all your cut, all your pronation, and your arms inside your body, so your shoulder's fully committed. Obviously, we would all love to be able to pull there, but that's not always the case, and there's a lot of other techniques to arm wrestling.
Yeah, right. As you start going down the hill, you start giving up fundamentals, you start giving up your shoulder to gain more hand control, or you start giving up your hand to gain more shoulder control.
Exactly. And as the sport grows, like originally people used to just wrestle with their wrists together like this, right? And then eventually they started actually holding hands, which is so much nicer. And once that happened, people realized you could take the guy's hand and roll the hand. And then maybe the strap came in. I'm not really sure the history if the strap came in before the flop press, but let's assume that the strap came in and then people started flopping. Either way.
Anyway, when you flop,
yeah,
this usually happens.
And then we need the strap. And if we both top roll, this usually happens. So the strap comes into play regardless of whether you like it or not. The strap is part of arm wrestling now, and that's because the sport
is growing,
and it has grown, and it continues to grow.
And growth is good.
Growth is good. As we learn, as people get better, and as the sport grows, new techniques come into play. It's like, it's like in MMA when jiu-jitsu started to become a factor. It's no different than any of that,
Yeah. So the strap has allowed these extreme moves, the King's move and the flop press, to really be an effective way to arm wrestle.
Yeah, and if the bottom line, as I'm wearing on my shirt right here from Fortis Fitness, which I can't wait to get back to Fortis Fitness. Sean, we miss you. Knowledge is power. Bottom line, the more you know, the more powerful you're going to be able to be. And in arm wrestling, it's no different. So as you learn the techniques on this hill, it doesn't mean that you have to use them, but knowing them and understanding them is going to give you the power to beat them. Yeah. Exactly. All right, guys, so the first part about the flop press, again, as we talk about this technique hill and everything, the whole objective is to give up hand to commit shoulder, right? So if I'm in a hook with my opponent here and I'm pulling on Alex like this, and I want to get my shoulder over so I can start to press down like this, well, if he's pulling hard, if this is a really tight match, that's A, it's going to be difficult, and B, it's dangerous, as we know, right? So once I'm here, what I can do is drop my wrist, and by doing that, now my arm, like my wrist angle, my arm is inside my shoulder, and it makes it easier for me to commit more shoulder.
Yeah, and just by giving up the wrist, he gains an extra 2 inches closer to the pin pad.
Yeah. And it's always that feeling of going from here with your opponent, like again, hook me a little deeper, going from here to here is always a little shocking for your opponent when it happens, unless you really know it's coming, right? So again, I'm trying to get under my opponent's hand, and so that I can commit my shoulder by giving up some wrist. We don't want to give up any finger flexion. This is really important. If I give up my fingers and just let my hand go and just try to push into the strap with my wrist here, which is how a lot of guys try to flop press, is just like that.
And I can just climb right out of his hand into his fingers, and now I have so much more leverage, and I can just sit here all day long.
It becomes a much more comfortable position, and once I've given this up, my finger flexion, that's really hard to get back. If I give up some wrist, there's ways you can move to try to get that back eventually if you're not like a just silver bullet flop presser, If it's something you've decided to go to because it feels good and then it's not working, you can still retreat from there. But if I give up my fingers completely and my opponent gets so much in my hand, you're not coming back from that position. So we cover the finger pressure, and the main reason again is containment. You need to contain your opponent's hand, but you're going to give up your wrist flexion so you can commit your shoulder.
Yep.
Now, which way do you press? Okay, as I said before, a lot of people try to press right down into the strap, which is good. That's how you're going to get some down pressure, especially if you combine it with some finger pressure to attack your opponent's pronation. If I just let Alex keep his pronation and I just push down like this, it doesn't work much, but same pressure down, pull, and then I just add my fingers, and it's a lot more difficult, right? So those are the two pressures that we're talking: down and attack some rotation. The final pressure, which is the money, right?
Yeah,
for press.
The press.
The press, what it is coming towards your opponent, pressing forward, pressing into his elbow. So if he tries to get his shoulder behind it, when I push this way, I'm pushing on his elbow hard. And then that down pressure, his bicep can't hold it.
Yeah.
If he runs away, I'm just taking that run away. Like he can't run anywhere
I have
anymore.
nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure in this part of my arm, my humerus and my shoulder.
Yeah.
And then when he starts to apply down pressure,
Yeah.
it attacks my bicep.
Yeah.
And I can't hold this position.
And for me, if you're not just a presser, if you can get your opponent running in this position here, you've got so much roll and so much of this like extra run as well. Like it leads you to so many other places you can go, which is again what's so cool with this hill. Like Michael Todd, every time he finishes a King's move, he finishes it with a press. He goes from one side of the hill to the other.
Yeah, pretty
right?
heroic. If you ask me.
Yeah, and you can do that with a press too. You can get somebody so committed this way that then when you have all this room to roll out, like it's a game. It's a fight. You're trying to bait your opponent, take things away, get advantages.
Yeah. Once strength is equal on the arm wrestling table, it becomes a chess match where you start giving things away or not taking your opponent's bait. Like
the 3 rules, right? Be strong, be strong. The second one is don't fight a losing battle, and the third one is don't take what's being given. So, as Alex said, once strength is relatively equal, those other 2 factors are literally just a chess match. It's just this or that. Am I going to go high? Are you going to go low?
Yeah.
And that's why this sport is so much fun, I think, to people, because it really is. Once the match stops, it becomes a mental game.
Yeah, and knowledge is power. So learn how to flop, and learn how to beat it, and you will be less filled with hate.
All right, guys, so those are the basics of how we understand to do the flop press. But now, how are you going to beat it? And when are you going to need to beat it? One of the things I think is important to consider, as we talked about, not a lot of people do it off the go. It's hard to do off the go. But having somebody flop press you off the go is by far the hardest type of flop press to stop.
Yeah, and usually in a match, if someone gets you to a flop press, it's because you are in a losing position and it allows them to get there.
Yeah, like the match has led to that position.
Yeah.
Right? So whatever it is that you've done to get in that position is the reason that the flop press is beating you. It's not because you're not defending the flop press properly.
Yeah,
right?
so now we're going to cover a couple ways to defeat the flop press off the go.
Right, so very similar to the King's move, since it's a strap-based move, one of the first things you can do is prevent your opponent from getting to the strap. So a lot of flop pressers will like to set up, and then, I mean, if anybody remembers BLM and Dallas Langston, right? This is very, we know this one. I guess he calls his slip the Cataract Special, where he sets up like this, and then he just comes right under his opponent like that. Well,
super hard to catch that.
Yeah.
But there is a way.
Yeah. So if you watch, I don't know that Jerry was doing it as aggressively or the same way. Maybe when he had his match with Ron and with John Brzezinski.
Yeah.
But both of them basically do the same thing. They do it a little bit different style. Ron stays a little bit higher hook, and John gets a little bit more under his hand.
But the point is, I'm matching his shoulder commitment.
Right.
So I don't let him win the bone line argument.
Yeah.
And then I'm not going to let him slip underneath, and I'm not going to let his hand get underneath mine.
Yeah.
So I'm going to force him into a hook, basically.
Yeah.
And then start edging up with my hand and beating his hand control.
Yeah. So if you watch the match with John Brzezinski, we'll throw a clip up. You can see that what John does is he blocks with a hook by meeting his wrists, like meeting Cataret's wrist with his wrist. And then as Cataret's trying to fight under to find a press, John is just staying on top and keeping his shoulder committed, and eventually Cataret's got to flop and slip underneath and gets a shitty flop, or I mean a shitty slip.
And it's a loss.
And it's a loss because it's a losing position. And Ron Bath, when he does it, it's very similar, except he just stays on top and actually gets the press.
Yeah,
I believe.
more high hookish.
Yeah, which is very similar to how Matt Mask did it, right?
Yeah. So Matt Mask did his in the strap in the WAL,
Yeah.
which allowed him to use a lot more drag.
Yeah.
So we're going to demo that one now. All right, the next move we're going to cover is an outside counter, and this is the way Matt Mask was able to defeat Jerry in one round in the WAL. And key thing here is that this wasn't a WAL, so they had the 9-inch pads that go all the way to the back, which just allows so much more room to drag. For King's moving, for low hand top rolling, it's just so much
for any
better.
dragging move, it's definitely a bit of an advantage. And you've also got to note that Matt Mask is probably one of the best low hand top rollers around, definitely the best one in the WAL that we can think of in the super heavies. Right?
Yeah. So the idea of the drag is I'm getting him extended outside of his shoulder and reducing his ability, his power level.
So off the go,
low
and he's
hand,
out there.
and now I'm transitioning into a high hook which just reduces his hand control even greater.
And it's, yeah, by compromising my pronation, it puts a lot more stress in the elbow, which even though Jerry's so strong there, you know, it's not an ideal situation. It's not what he wants.
Yeah, but even from this position, Matt Max couldn't finish with a top roll. He didn't have enough rolling power to defeat Jerry's finger pressure and his shoulder commitment. So what Matt Mass had to do was get his own shoulder committed and then finish him with a press. So sometimes you gotta beat the presser with a press.
Actually, if you think about it, most guys that beat it, they beat it with a press. Like when Devin did the same thing to Jerry. Now Devin didn't use the low hand to get there. Devin's such a dominant high hooker that he was able to get in that high hook from the beginning. And then once it was there, he was just way too strong.
Yeah.
So yeah, learn to press, because one of the best ways to beat the press is a press. And once you understand it, you'll have a better idea of how to beat it. The best way to beat moves is keep people away from them. You know, like Devin says, arm wrestling isn't about going where you're strong. It's about taking your opponents where they're weak or keeping them away from where they are strong, right?
What you got, Jerry?
All right, so that's the video. Hope you like it. Leave some feedback in the comments.
Subscribe, share,
Do all those things. And monkeys out.
Peace.